And it honestly, in that moment, taught me absolutely everything about what was wrong with the game and about how far I could go if I just decided to try and do absolutely everything myself. And I realized permission is the worst thing you can ask, particularly from someone who cares less than you and has less ambitious than you. And this industry is addicted to doing it, dude.
Hello and welcome to the Lions podcast with me, Simon Cook, CEO of Lions. Now, in this In the Making series, we're here to delve into the visionary and the most awarded minds in the creative marketing industry today. Now, to bring their stories to life, we asked them to talk about 5 pieces of work. The work that made them want to be a creative in the first place. The work that they wish they'd made themselves. The work that almost didn't get made. And the work that made them. And then, of course, finally, the work that's still very much in the making. So in other words, the work they've yet to make. Today's guest may just believe that the industry is a little bit too timid. His 30-year career has been defined by ferocity, energy, and provocation, and by the firm belief that design isn't just decoration, it's a cultural force of nature. From chasing his creative heroes across top agencies to becoming the youngest agency chairman at Great London, to co-founding Uncommon Creative Studio, this guy's built a career on designing both brands and work that not only disrupt culture, but people genuinely care about. Nils Leonard, welcome to In the Making.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks for joining
Hello.
us. Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. So look, I wanted to start with a bit of a provocative one.
Okay.
So you said in the past that the industry plays it too safe. You know, we did a survey earlier this year where we sort of agree with you. We found out that only 13% of companies really embrace creative risk. And first question for you, I guess, is, are you someone throughout your career that has always had a bit of an audacious streak?
Yeah, I mean, the research is telling. Yes, I have. I'm quite needy. I guess, right or wrong, I've always attached the word creativity and the subject matter of creativity to being controversial or talked about or to change. And I've always seen, I think, and quite mechanically studied the versions of creativity that I think have made that sort of impact. And so, you know, when I sort of started Uncommon, there was a really interesting realization I made where a lot of people talk about selling creativity in this industry and all the above. But it dawned on me that the majority of them don't really sell creativity. They sell assets and content and integration and synergy and all those other brilliant words that aren't actually the same thing. And I wondered to myself, what percentage of the industry, if you literally said, you know, you don't make money from creativity, would actually die? And I think a lot of them would just still be here because they don't really sell it. And so the experiment with Uncommon was trying to literally sell that. But you know, it's a long way around, isn't it? But the answer to your question, yeah, I think I've always had a needy streak.
So if we go right back to the beginning, if we think about the origin story of Nils Leonard, growing up in North London?
Yeah, Wealdstone,
North London? Okay. What do we need to know about that time, which tells us about who you are today?
Oh, God. I mean, just so weird all this, isn't it? It turns into therapy. I was very loved, which first of all sounds insane for me to say that, but I grew up in a shithole. Genuinely working class background. My dad was a tattooist. My mother was a teacher. But I was unanimously loved and believed in. And that breeds a sort of delusion, I think, in children, which is really helpful in later life because it becomes ambition, I think, to some degree, or belief. But I guess inherently I was surrounded by creativity. There was tattoo flash on the walls. There was always music. My parents were hippies. My name isn't Swedish. They named me Nils after Nils Lofgren, the guitarist, Bruce Springsteen's guitarist. And so I was surrounded by all that. But because of the background we had and where we came from, really, they'd never seen a path for me or for any of us that was creative. Like my parents had never been to university. Their parents had never been to university. I still haven't been, by the way. But there wasn't a conversation about an ability to live a life like that wasn't renegade. So my dad being a tattooist, I suppose, was as creative as you get. I looked at music, I looked at art, and I looked at the world and thought, these things are amazing, what I understood of them, but I genuinely couldn't see a path to making money there.
And how has that informed how you show up to work every day?
Initially, I was lucky enough to get a job via the job centre, seriously, which is a place for anyone listening in the UK, you go to mostly get jobs, on a building site, frankly, or in a, as a runner in a terrible office. And I went there and there was one job in advertising. She had to pull the dust off of the A for advertising in the thing. And I got an interview and I just considered that to be an incredibly lucky omen and that I wasn't going to fucking waste it. So,
well, we're going to get into your first gig, your first job. But before we do that, another quote from you. When you're considering a career in advertising, you've described it as a slutty version of art, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that to this day?
I mean, literally, yeah. Who knew? I was bang on. I mean, that was how I felt about it when I started, was that if I couldn't be an artist, I genuinely had no conception at the time of how you could just be an artist and make money. So I was like, God, and I looked at this thing and I saw the closest things I saw to art were massive adverts at the cinema, fashion industry, the whatever. And I thought, well, it's kind of like art in that I feel things and I'm moved by it and it's beautiful. And some of it doesn't make sense in a way I really like. But I could also see the finance and the commerce and the money and the business in it. And I found that exciting. And so, yeah.
And linking that to your first piece of work, or pieces, I should say.
Yep.
Because the first one we want you to get into is the type of work that inspired you to become a creative in the first place. And I know you're going to take us back to the 90s and describe how that felt.
Well, okay, yeah. So I think at the time I remember being incredibly affected by certain characters in film and certain characters in books, but mainly by the sort of fragrance and luxury advertising of that period, which, there was some great ads back then, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure loads of people have lauded, things like Guinness Surfers and whatever else. But there was a real movement toward almost, moving way outside of that, started arguably by people like Anna Wintour, who believed that fashion and that world was sort of a higher form of art as well. And so there were these incredible black and white ads, Bruce Weber, beautiful, non-linear, didn't have a narrative, didn't make any fucking sense, but somehow you felt them. And all of that world just communicated with me. And I'd love to give you one or two, but I actually went back to look at them after telling you that I thought this was good. And I couldn't find a single one I actually thought wasn't shit now, but
in isolation.
Yeah, in isolation, seeing them on their own, they make no fucking sense and they are just a garbled mess. But actually,
and many have been parodied over the years as well. 100%.
Oh, it's become like you can't watch them now with a straight face. But it wasn't a category we were tired of then. It's important to point that out. It was incredibly brave. Before they were parodied, they were really disruptive. There's a reason they're parodied. It was because they had a shape no one had done before. It wasn't an A to Z with a product in the middle. I just remember being really affected by it. And then I was really affected by the fantasy of the people and the moments that must have made them. Yeah. I got lost in, someone shot that on that place, in that beach, on that rooftop. Someone lives that life. They get on planes and they have those ideas. And I was like, who the fuck does that? What an amazing way to live.
And from that time, from that initial period of inspiration, what have you taken with you? What from that period is injected into your own work today?
I think a love and appreciation of beauty and craft, for sure. Whatever you want to say, the photographers of that day, the directors of that day, understood how to see the world a certain way. And I think that version of the world, I've always been really drawn to makers who see the world a certain way. And for a brief moment, the gift they give us is that we can live in that world. I think Sorrentino's like that now, love or hate his work. The Great Beauty, Hand of God, The Young Pope. For a brief second, you get to live in that version of events. And I think anyone that can take you somewhere like that is gifted. And I think that's an amazing, amazing sentiment. I also think the audacity of the fashion industry, I'm drawn really, I think, to people that don't give a shit, or rather that they give a shit so much they completely refuse the rules of the day.
Right.
And the fashion industry didn't give a single fuck. Never apologize, never explain is a Kate Moss quote. And I know exactly where that came from. It's easy to go, oh, that's just fashion garbage. It's not. The more you explain anything, the more you undo it. And there's a lot about this life we try too hard to quantify and to explain. There's too much cleverness. And I think the best of our game just hits you, man. I'm sure many people have sat here and gone Guinness Surfers and lauded the words and lauded whatever, but make no mistake, the best thing about that is the emotion, the vibe it creates with no reasoning at all.
And that first spark of inspiration, as you said, took you to the job centre.
Oh, yeah.
Which landed you in your first agency, which was?
Lintas, Emirati Purist Lintas.
Yeah. What do you remember about that time?
Fucking hell, you sure you want it?
And who would you say was the person there that perhaps recognised your creative potential?
Well, the Emirati Purist Lintas had an office on Soho Square.
Right.
Advertising still made major money. It had real characters in it. And I know that sounds mad, doesn't it, in this world where suddenly creativity is so open, but you would have a creative department full of people who used to be a butcher, someone who used to be a footballer.
Yeah.
They were random and arguably, honestly, genuinely so much more diverse than they are now. If that word was even a conversation back then, it wasn't, by the way. And I turned up and I was just like, what is this place? I didn't know what a meeting was, Simon.
Yeah.
Like, what's a meeting?
Yeah.
What's a diary?
Feeling.
Yeah. But the main person I think who took me under their wing was a gentleman called Simon Fairweather, who was at that time a typographer, which was a very type-driven version of a designer for anyone who has no idea what I'm saying. And he was honestly my first experience of someone who really cared. He was amazingly passionate, genuinely, about typography, about the craft of it, about the care that it had an impact in the world. Forgive me for leaping aside. I saw an amazing thing with Johnny Ive where someone asked him, can you discuss the power of design, please? And I think if Simon had been able and I'd have asked this question, he'd have answered a similar way. But Johnny said, which I love about him, he finds a way to break it right down. He said, just imagine that something's on a desk and you open it and you take the top off and you open the object and you unwrap it and you look at it. And you just feel for a brief second that the person that made that really, really gave a shit. And that feeling is translated. That's design. And Simon genuinely, completely deluded or not, believed that typography, the choice of it, the beauty of it, where you put it, and the act of creating an advert could matter in the world and was a massive personal importance as a human. And honestly, man, I bought in like, young, affected person that I am. I was like fucking all in. And that, honestly, all of it, the life of it, walk up the road and get a rocket salad. He taught me how to eat a lunch in Soho.
Well, we spoke to Simon.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And to be honest, this is starting to make sense now. Because what he came back with was a very concise but quite cryptic quote for us to throw at you.
All right.
He just says, "Hi, Nils. Hope the suits still fit. And yes, I had the rocket salad." What the hell is that about?
Well, yeah. So the whole dream of this industry isn't just that it's a job, is it? Let's be honest. We all, you included, want to be a part of something bigger, a way of living, a way of seeing, a way of being. And at that point in particular, I learned that there were a bunch of people working hard, playing hard, going about their life in a way that I just thought was incredibly beautiful. Look, I guess what I'm saying is I'm immensely grateful to him and others for not just teaching me the craft of my job, but teaching me a life or a way of life, whether you buy into it or not. And that was a massive gift to someone. My family couldn't teach me that.
Yeah. Despite the brevity, he was very happy to talk to us.
Okay,
so
great.
Cared about the work, but cared about you as well.
No, he's an amazing man.
Second piece of work then, Nils. This one is a piece of work that you maybe wish you made. And this is Whatever It Takes by Macmillan Cancer. Do you want to set it up for us?
When I was asked this question, I immediately went to, older work and things I'm sure others have talked about. There's some great stuff in there, like, Meet the Superhumans and things like that I remember being incredibly affected by. But genuinely, if you stop me now and just said, ignore all that and trying to be clever and what do you just wish you'd fucking made? What do I wish I'd made it uncommon? This bit of work is one of those. And I think it's probably the best bit of short film I've seen in years, other than Chris Milk's Last Daydream, which I think is the best short film of all time. But it's incredibly beautiful. I'll test anybody to watch it and not weep. I love it for a variety of reasons. It's big. It talks about death. I know our industry can touch on emotion. I know it's important to sell. I know it's important to be funny but it is an ad about a bunch of people who care for people while they die. And I think, the OG creative idea really, I believe, is really we're all going to die one day. And we get one go at all this. And I think there's some bits of work that just have the right to do that. And you'll see it in a bit of our work. You'll see things that we've made dance on that subject matter because it's one close to my heart and just close to the hearts of people at Uncommon. When you're trying to matter in the world, you want a bigger subject matter. But I saw this and just thought it was insane. It tore me to pieces. The casting, it's not clever on a script. It's like we see Macmillan staff care for people who have cancer. That's the script. And I like that it's not clever. I really do. I know a load of people will be like, oh, where's the twist? And I'm fuck all that. It just really hits so deep. And it is purely the power of observation, the power of music, beautiful cut, seeing just enough. And then genuinely, somehow, pushing at moments that for a brief second, you feel like you're witnessing a life that you don't know or understand, but somehow hits you as true or could be yours or could be a friend of yours. And that is just an insane skill. And I just think it's exceptional.
I know you're a big believer in the power of music and what it can do for not just ads, but for any piece of creative. This, I believe, is a Vivaldi Four Seasons.
Well, it's Richter's version, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What does it do to this piece?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. I found out, I got so interested in this piece, I found out it's actually, and I don't know whether they knew this, I suspect they did. It's a track that a lot of people actually choose to pass to when they die, which I found out, which was like really heavy. But yeah, it's incredible. And I tell you, the most amazing thing about it is I'd argue it's poignant, but it's an incredibly uplifting bit of music. You could have whacked Bon Iver on there or fucking, I don't know, but they didn't. They put this incredibly uplifting bit of music on there, which somehow has this tender balance on a knife edge of hope in absolutely everything you see, which is super smart. I mean, there's a guy who breakdances in the ad.
Yeah.
There's things like that happen which shouldn't remotely occur in an ad where you're trying to make people feel sad. But that's the point. I don't actually think it makes you feel sad. I actually think it makes you feel longing and gratitude and makes you think about your loved ones. Like it does all this magic shit it doesn't claim to do. And then it says, by the way, in this moment that you don't want to think about, because the hardest thing in the world to think about, by the way, is your own demise or the demise of someone you love. There are a bunch of people who care for those people. I just think it's an immortal piece of work. I think people will be talking about it in 50 years.
Well, and props to the team at AMV BBDO, multiple Lion winner. So look, following your stint at your first agency, many roles, Rainey Kelly, AMV BBDO, well-trodden tenure at Grey before setting up Uncommon. So speaking to some people who were back with you during those humble beginnings at Uncommon, they described it as 2 desks in a cobbled courtyard with no clients, no safety net, and a potential lawsuit hanging over your head. Tell us a bit about that time.
Definite lawsuit, yeah. Your friend and mine, Sir Martin Sorrell, didn't like the fact we left.
Sure.
Day one of opening was literally day one of opening. We had nothing up our sleeve. We had a press release. And so, yeah, we got lent some desks by the lovely folk at Analog Folk who gave us some desks in Clerkenwell that we love. And we opened up and we're lucky enough to share the office with a bunch of guys who had little dogs, which was great. That was nice.
Nice touch.
Yeah, but and we put this press release out, and it was all our spaff that I'm sure you've read and everything we believed. Because the other benefit, by the way, of having a year getting fisted by a lawyer is you get a lot of time to think. And I think if we'd have started 2 weeks after Grey, I'd have probably started Grey Part 2, thinking that was all correct because it had gone quite well. And we actually really examined who we wanted to be in, the industry we wanted to be in, and really the business we wanted to create outside of that. And it definitely wasn't an agency. And we thought, very hard about Uncommon's place in the world, the sort of clients we thought existed, the dependent relationship that agencies have on clients, all that shit. We got really deep on it. And so I think it let us start with much more of a point of view that was definitely still a myth and delusion at that point. But I'm immensely grateful for the way it went down. Obviously at the time it was incredibly painful, but it was fucking cool to open, I can tell you that.
I bet. So a long time to think. Obviously couldn't speak to any prospective clients. But then when you did open, which brings us to your next piece of work, actually, a British original. You've identified this piece as a piece of work that almost didn't get made. What were the circumstances there? When
we started to work with British Airways, it was very, very fast. It all happened. They were fresh out of the pandemic.
Right.
And so that obviously crippled the airline industry. Those guys were 2 billion or something ridiculous, And as a result, there were some scenarios around our first piece of work that weren't ideal. In my head, we'd have had months, and we'd have sat around and we'd have made this thing, and we could all peruse it and craft it and whatever. And actually, it had to be very, very fast. And what most people don't realize is, I think they look at that and go, "Oh, they didn't choose to launch with a big telly ad or big whatever." And I guess a series of mistakes, decisions, and disasters meant that we just simply couldn't open with a large television commercial. And so we thought very hard about a different way of doing it, and realized we landed on, this idea of a British original. And I sort of said, somewhat deluded in a meeting, "I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make a load of posters, where everyone is different. Because if we're about being original, then no poster should be the same." And I was like, "Oh, that's really good. Yeah, let's do that." And then the media company were like, "Yeah, no, dude, we've got like 512 insertions or something." And I was like, "Oh, fuck." And then I was like, well, let's just try and do that. So we did. So the format was business, leisure, ... And it ended up being quite famous work and quite awarded. But everything I look back on really is some form of evidence, if that makes sense, that a certain way of working and a certain belief can be repaid. And we have never, ever, ever just given up. I promise you, never. And we've never just allowed circumstance to dictate our future. Because the world, I think, this is slightly weird, wants to know how much you want it. And it asks you questions. And the questions are things like, "Sorry, you can't do that," or "Suddenly this has all gone wrong," or "This has crashed and your hard drive's died," or, and it will just do that stuff. And really, I viewed all those things always as, well, how much do you really fucking want it? And if you completely and utterly refuse to allow that stuff to make you average, then you'll do all right.
Well, it paid off. It went on to win the Outdoor Lions Grand Prix in 2023. And at the time, you did an interview with our very own Chloe Markovich from Contagious. Here's what she had to say about it.
When Contagious interviewed the team at Uncommon behind this campaign, they explained that the insight here is that what sets BA apart is that it treats its passengers like individuals. And that's what comes across in the campaign through the 500 plus executions. The brand is really in the background here. The focus is on the passengers and the myriad reasons why they're traveling. And by taking that tack, BA is showing people we care about you and how important this trip is to you. Uncommon also told us that when they researched the brand ahead of their pitch, BA said that what sets the brand apart is its wit and charm. It made people look out for the ads and read them because there was a witty surprise in store for them. How often does that happen, that people actually seek out advertising?
Thank you, Chloe. So how did you convince the client to go for this? Because it's very pared back. That, limited visuals, as you said, so tempting to go with something bombastic and maybe TV-led.
Yeah.
You went with outdoor.
Yeah.
And something that was completely stripped back. How did you get them over the line on that?
A few things. I mean, outdoor's wicked. And I think people right now, I think outdoor has seen an openly discussed renaissance, actually, to the point where I don't have to convince anybody of that. But we've always loved out of home. And I think the secret weapon of Uncommon has been out of home, despite our modernity. And it forces you, I think, to behave iconically if you do it really well. When we got to it, the creative that landed on it came into the room and he was like, I think I have this thing, but I think it's a bit memey. And he meant like a meme, like a fucking internet meme. And he went, business, leisure, mischief. And I was just like, hang on a fucking minute, that's nuts. And he'd set it terribly in a Keynote file. And it was, on a white paper, it was terrible. But it looked really cool because it didn't look like an ad. And I thought, fuck, maybe that's like amazing. And so I just said, look, can you write 20 more? And they kept coming, to eat an olive the size of my fist, business, leisure, remission. You're like, fucking hell. And it started to come. And I just think it was one of those ones where, and the guys at BA are brilliant marketers, genuinely, in that I didn't have to convince them it was good. They just they spotted it like I did. They were like, yeah, that's fucking great. The discussion point was not using imagery. They're on a white background. And the brand, I'd argue the brand sort of wins because BA own that, but there was a discussion for a couple of weeks about, but it's about holidays and life and color. And I was like, no, that's the bit that happens in your head, which I just don't think most people maybe talk about enough. And so it was an exercise in writing. We had a Google Doc that everybody in the studio was firing into because we had to write 500. And it was like a form of therapy.
Which is your favorite?
Mischief, to this day. To this day, really. There's some beautiful ones, but Mischief's my favorite. If you can land, I've always believed if you can land on something much bigger than an ad, but a format, it's a joy. You know, we have a little bit of that with the Hiscox work that we've created, you know, the disastrous stuff and some others, but that work was a joy. And I just look back and go, you know, there's some bits of work that I think epitomise Uncommon's view of the world, you know. That's one of them.
Wanted to talk about the brands that you decide to work with. You said a couple of times that you are ferocious, interesting word, ferocious about the brands that you work for. What does a brand need to stand for in order to get their foot in the door at Uncommon?
They have to want what we make. And that sounds madly simple, but I remember being in a previous life, being so overjoyed that a client would come to see us or that we were part of a new business process. I hadn't remotely inquired as to whether they wanted the sort of work we made or wanted to make good work at all. If you take a bad client on, or even worse, just a scared or average client on, you don't just have the higher possibility of making bad work. You are wasting the most precious thing you have, which is your time and the time of your incredible people. And you don't get that back. And so if I describe 10 years of, say, Uncommon to you and said that every moment was precious, and then said I allowed a year of that to get eaten up by a client who made terrible, invisible work, it's damaging. It's not even a conversation. You literally can't do it. And that's not swagger, I promise you, or any sort of, you know, it just dawned on me the worst thing I could possibly do is focus all of the attention of this brilliant studio on the wrong person. And so we're really ferocious to this day about the people that we take on, you know. And as a result, I'd argue we make better work. Like people say, oh, I wish we had clients like Uncommon. I've heard people say that. I'm like, we don't have different clients to you. You know, they just arrive and they want what it is we do.
And 8 years in now?
Yeah, 8 years.
That's flown by, isn't it?
Stop it. Not if you look at my face.
We're both looking pretty good.
Yeah.
It's coming through.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we have got grey hair. 8 years, 3 studios, Stockholm, New York and London, about 350, 370 people, something like that.
Oh, congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
So this next piece of work, this is always a bit of a surprise, actually, because when I ask, what's the piece of work that made you, it's quite common for it to be contemporary. And actually, the piece you've given us has an interesting story attached to it. So wondered if you would indulge our listeners and tell them about Atomic Type.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Forgot about that. Yeah. I've always followed heroes and I chased them around and I tried to learn from them. And Paul Belford and Nigel Roberts were the ECDs at Abbott Mead Vickers at that time. And I went there because Paul, to this day, I think, created a reference point moment in this industry where he started making print ads and poster ads that didn't look like ads. They looked like egg boxes or they looked like early Swiss design, or, you know, they were just incredible. And so I followed them there. Not through any fault of theirs, I don't think, but Abbott Mead was incredibly traditional. The creatives sat on the 7th floor like some sort of fucking Eye of Sauron, and designers were on like floor 2 or 3. I worked in arguably the best design department I've ever worked in, Steve Davies, John Tisdall. It was fucking crazy. But I couldn't break into the creative department. And there was this spirit of permission that everybody had to have to do anything. And the creatives were like these demigods who would, you know, come in half drunk and make very poor decisions, I thought, on. Anyway, so I'm starting to get frustrated because I'm a deluded twat like that. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to make my own ads, you know. So I was working with the Type Foundry, surprise, surprise. And you could buy a type over the phone. And I always thought that was quite funny that I could ring up and talk about a typeface and buy it. So I made a suite of posters, all of which recreated a letter with a phone, beautifully photographed by my friend Max Oppenheim, and then made this suite of posters. Once I'd made them, though, I then thought to myself, well, how are these going out there? And I want people to see them. And I remember Creative Review was the magazine of the time. It literally was where you would dream about being. And I thought, well, fuck it, what's to stop me? You know, I made these posters for you guys. They're putting them up everywhere. So I rang. I looked in the opening cover of Creative Review. A guy called Gavin Lucas was the creative editor. And he had a phone number in those days. And I rang it and he picked up. And I wanged on for 20 minutes about who I was and this work and how lovely I thought it was. And he said, please send it. A month later, it runs as a DPS in the mag, massive. And some fuckwit from the creative department tried to come down and bollock me and, you know, was like, what are you doing? And you've got to get our permission. And I was like, well, no, I don't. I didn't mention Abbott Mead. And by the way, I did these myself, so I don't actually. And it honestly, in that moment, taught me absolutely everything about what was wrong with the game and about how far I could go if I just decided to try and do absolutely everything myself. And I realized permission is the worst thing you can ask particularly from someone who cares less than you and has less ambitious than you. And this industry is addicted to doing it, dude. To our clients, to our superiors, we're asking permission to make our dreams come true from people who care less. And I thought, I'm never going to do that again.
And do you remember at the time the team you assembled to get behind this rogue idea? Do you remember the person who shot the campaign?
Yeah, Max Oppenheim, yeah.
Yeah, we spoke to Max.
Okay, shit. This is such a weird
photographer
show.
for his piece.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a school report, this, because we asked him what it was like working with you. He remembered how you scoured design outlets and prop houses to find phones that form the right shapes, in your mind's eye anyway. He described you as exacting, detail-oriented, but also praised your ability to push a concept to its furthest point while restraining a graphic and elegant approach. Very nice review.
That's really lovely. I'll take that
Very
from Max.
touching.
He's
Thank
a
you,
legend.
Max.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was from, 20 years ago?
Yeah, almost, yeah.
What was it that specifically made you call out that piece? It sounds like it was very formative.
The story, I don't want to... I'm really genuinely desperate that people in our industry wake up and see where they're at. I don't want to wang on about something because I think it's quite good and I want you all to think, I'd love you all to think I'm good. The biggest thing I could possibly try to give people, I think at this point in my career, is some belief and an ability to not play the game like it's been developed. It doesn't work. It's not working. And if you wanted proof, and I believe the world sends proof of things at some point, the skip ad button, the emergence of AI, whatever you want to call it, these things are signposts for a way forward that doesn't involve the industry like it currently exists. And I'm only saying it because I think there's so many fucking amazing people I know so hamstrung by a way. And so if anyone was listening to this, like whatever you think of those ads is irrelevant. What I learned is if you learn to do these things yourself, there is nothing to stop you in the world just becoming who you want, starting any brand you want. And I know a load of people talk that shit, but I mean it sincerely. PR is just relationships. It's the ability to get up and put something in a magazine by telling somebody about it so that they might feature it. It's the same skills, by the way, that mean you do well in a review, in a creative review. It's all the same stuff. And sorry, forgive me for wanging on, but I just feel, I really feel like this industry and the best people inside it need to wake up. And I think we're spending too much fucking time on LinkedIn and I read too much shit and I see too many people worried about things that don't matter. And I wish those people would pour their energy into making shit that was going to push us forwards, because those people can do it. They're just currently not.
We have a lot of young folks, or certainly younger than you and I, listening to this show, based on the fact that you're calling out permission, but also, I guess, just waiting to be chosen to do something. What would your advice be to all of the young folks listening who are thinking about entering this industry or are struggling perhaps to find their place?
I think a lot about this stuff. I've got two main bits. One is, how many of us really picture success for ourselves? What does your perfect life look like? And I mean it sincerely, like manifesting such a bullshit word, but the ability to codify and not lie to yourself and deal in drama, but say to yourself, no, I want to do this. I can see myself here. And these are the things that are stopping me. Literally see where you wish you were and just take the time to ask yourself what that looks like. Because not many of us talk enough about our actual dreams. We don't give ourselves permission. The second is, to do that, you then have to learn to remove need and dependency from others. And so if I've just talked about the dependency you have on others for praise, you also have to remove the dependency to make. Our industry is an expert in going, I've had this amazing idea. Now I just need Joe and Jane and Bob and Sarah to help me make it. And I'm like, learn to write, learn to art direct, learn to design, learn to edit, learn to code, learn to AI, learn to prompt. Most importantly, learn to articulate. Learn to take everything you've got in front of you. I think Max was lovely in his review of me. I'd argue the best spirit I had was to convince Max and Gavin to work on that work without any payment. And if I'm honest, it's honestly bringing people with you and getting them to see the world the way you do is probably the biggest untaught skill in our industry.
Well, it's a sentiment that's echoed by, you mentioned Paul Belford.
Oh, yeah.
So what he had to say about this was, in my opinion, creative people shouldn't necessarily be limited by working within a single discipline. It's entirely possible to be a jack of all trades and a master of 5 or 6. And that's a feature of Uncommon's work and Nils's work that I really admire.
Oh, he's a G. He's a real one. Paul's a real one. I'll take that. Thank you, mate.
So 8 years on, getting into reflections and also probably posing a question that many people are thinking about, because came out of the gate, really creative, independent spirit, very distinctive position that Uncommon has. Of course, now part of Havas. Has that killed the independent spirit?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm sure anybody who'd done a deal would protest that it had or hadn't. But I think if you look at, I want everyone to look at our deal or journey and really study the details. And not because I think they're good. I just think there's an interesting chat in here. Most of the time you grow a creative company and you start it with its own vision and momentum and you push it forwards. And then you eventually at some point maybe do a deal. And now our rhetoric in our industry is you do that deal, you fold into another company and you suddenly, for money, let's be candid, are rolled into another company that's not doing so well, asked to fix it, and you spend the next 5 years of your life doing that. We've not done that. We haven't. We've taken another building that is also our building, and we've grown and we've opened studios on our own in other markets. And really, the deal with Havas and Vivendi and Yannick and those guys has been incredible in that it's far more of a shared investment in a way of seeing the world and the future that I really hope works. If we fuck it up, we fucked it up. They didn't fuck it up. They've given us a load of rope. We took the investment and we took the deal to be able to go and do the things we wanted to do without compromising the studio, open in the States, expand into different disciplines. We're trying to genuinely move into places that people in our game haven't done before: built environment, architecture, retail design. And they very much saw the world the same way we did. There were, a lot of people interested in trying to play a part in Uncommon, but every single one of those people wanted something that we viewed as a compromise.
Right.
And I hopefully think if you look at our work, or if you speak to anybody working in the studio, there is no rhetoric about losing our independence, although independence is never a word we've ever used anyway. I don't think the studio's changed. I think the culture's grown. I think we're as ferocious as we were. I think the difficulties now are there. There are threats to us. Our threats are our size. The threats are that we compromise, that our energy levels wane. I don't know. They're definitely threats, but I think if we screw it up, genuinely, we've done that ourselves. I'm also fueled by our ability to behave in an independent way, to do what we want to do. But by the way, you can control those things in the covenants of your deal. Mm. So I would just urge people to really know what it is they're fighting for, and then exact those. You don't have to choose. It doesn't have to be black or white. You don't have to get the deal you wanted or compromise completely, which I think is the rhetoric of our industry.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, as part of the working with some of the most influential brands on the planet right now, brings us to your last piece. And this is where I get to ask the tantalizing question. What is the piece of work which is in the making?
We have a great relationship with the guys at EA Sports. We obviously rebranded what was FIFA, the football game, into FC and did a lot of great work there. We were lucky enough to work with them on the launch of Skate. Now, people who know Skate will be like, oh, fuck, because people who know Skate fucking love Skate. It is an OG game. It's been 7 years or something since the last one. The best thing about it, though, is we just did something really, really simple. The premise of Skate is you can skate off a building, you can skate down a ramp, you can do whatever. You can do that sort of stuff that the normal world and physics stop you doing. So we asked ourselves, well, what if in real life, in camera, we showcase what it might be like if the whole world was like Skate? And, we've just released that. And there's basically a skate film that we've made, which is the journey of a skate crew, captured in all the ways that a skate film would be made, except, of course, completely ignoring the actual laws of physics and personal injury.
Okay. What can we expect then?
Broken arms, teeth getting knocked out. Yeah, all of it. It's really exciting, and I'm gimping out about the details. Working with the Sacred Egg, brilliant director duo, Ed and Alex, who obviously I go way back with. But the work I think is really, really uplifting. It's very different for Uncommon again. We make a load of different stuff, I know, but I think people will see this and be like, whoa, it's fun in the biggest sense of the word. And it's just joyous, man. It's great. It's like really liberated, beautiful bit of film that I really think people are going to feel.
Here, here. Back to therapy, if that's all right with you.
Fuck, okay, yeah.
We're gonna end and bring it home with a couple of biggies, if that's all right.
All right.
First one, you're a very driven person, Nils. What are you chasing?
Jesus, okay. Mattering.
Okay.
When I get lost in it all and incredibly grateful and all that other human shit, I think about how lucky I am, and I think about my family, and I think about my life, and I think about how I spend my days.
Yeah.
We get to spend our jobs doing this, and I really thought in my year off, actually in particular, very hard about how hard I'd worked and the things that I had given up and things I'd missed. And you know what dawned on me? You work that hard on shit work too. You don't work any less hard on shit work. You just make shit work as a result of it, or a client makes you make, you know. And I thought to myself, what if we didn't? And what if we were trying to make something where I just didn't waste anybody's fucking time? Like, that's the biggest promise I could possibly make a creative.
Time is really important to you.
Yeah, it's massive. It's all you get, really. It's all you get, and you don't get a lot of it. And not just time, but the time you get on a project, the time you get on a brief. You know, I'm, as I said, like, humbled by some of the briefs we get now. And I think I'm only going to get this brief once in my life. And some of the briefs are mad, you know, huge. And I'm like, God, well, okay, if I only get it once, how could I possibly give myself the get out of making something fucking average? And so I'm driven by that. I'm driven by the massive fear of just going through the fucking motions.
What's your biggest wish for the industry? What do you feel like you are screaming into an abyss and you feel like you're not being heard on?
If you want to change it, do it.
Okay.
There really isn't anybody going to stop you. And I think a human magic is deluding yourself until it isn't delusion anymore. And we're really good at it as people. I swear to God, the act of trying is magic. But you do have to see it, and you do have to go at it, and you do have to be mechanical, and you do have to go through the pain and all the other bits. But when you do it, the world will give you back. I promise it will. It never, ever disappoints. As long as you really do go for it, it really doesn't. And you'll get bad news. And the trick is just simply refusing. And I just read too much about this industry and the people inside it. And I just think, you know, the lessons are out there. You know, the Samuel Rosses of the world and the Virgil Ablohs of the world, and pick anyone else, the Clints from Courtiers of the world, have all learnt their own lessons their way. And yet we're so happy to make them reference points and look at ourselves with some sort of doom. And I think we're giving ourselves a get out. And I hate it.
Final question, Nils. We've spoken a lot about your creative heroes. We've spoken to many of them, in fact, along the way, and quoted them directly at you. What do you want your creative legacy to be?
Oh.
Does it make you feel icky?
It does a bit. What do I want my creative legacy to be? I'd like to have made some things. We talk a lot about reference points at Uncommon. We try with every brief to make them. And by that, I mean, not just something that's going to be great around launch, but something that someone might refer to in 3 to 5 to 10 years' time. I think we've made some bits of work like that, whether people agree or not. I actually do. I don't think everything we've made has been like that. I think the act of trying changes our work. And I hope that some of that work lives on way past me and is referred to and whatever. I also really hope that Uncommon is a reference point. I really want people to say that they tried and to see it as it is. Not as I don't need it all to be good. I just really do think we've accomplished some things and are accomplishing some things that are different. And honestly, I really hope people see that. And honestly, I think the best thing I could hope for, it's funny, isn't it? This weird thing you've got me doing. Well, I've just sat here, haven't I, and eulogized the people that gave me a chance. I would love, and have always fantasized about an alumni coming out of Uncommon or coming out of a relationship with me and just them being really good at what they do or seeing the world a certain way. And at some point someone goes, oh, I knew they worked at Uncommon. That would be great. I was watching we made a film with Nick Cave.
Yeah.
And it was our first feature film and I was overjoyed. And I went and watched it like 4 times and I was sat in the cinema and sat there with a glass of wine at the back, and the titles rolled, and our name came up, and some guy 3 rows away went, "Fucking Uncommon." Made me so fucking happy. Made me so happy. And just that people just, that we might have mattered, that we might have made someone a bit better, that we might have given somebody a chance, that the world and culture and the things we live in might be a better place for us having played our part in it. And by that, I mean, there might be brands that exist that didn't. There might be talent that are doing things that they previously wouldn't have been. That would be amazing.
I think that's more than enough and a good place to end. Nils, always such a pleasure. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thanks, Si.
Thanks so much for joining me on In the Making. If today's conversation has sparked something about audacity, creativity, or just what it takes to make great work that matters, you can find more of that thinking on our intelligence platform, The Work. And there you can catch up on all of the wisdom from this year's Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button or follow the Lions podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Until next time, thank you very much.